everyone, and welcome. This is Rixx Javix, and I thought it would be interesting to create a series of videos, the creative process behind some of the War for New Eden board game creative, with the board game coming out in March of 2025, in only a few months here, to walk through some of the creative processes behind the decisions that were made, the way the game looks and the way the game plays. And I thought that the community might find that interesting. So for the first one, we're going to focus completely on the core package illustration. That's the giant box that the game comes in, the core game. There are numerous packages for the Pirate extensions and the Titan expansion and other elements, but we'll cover those in a future installment. So for this one, I just wanted to focus on the core package illustration of the big box, because this was kind of where we started when almost 2 years ago, when we started work on the game and when I was first contacted by Titan Forge. This was kind of, it's this cornerstone or the main illustration of the entire process. So it was kind of really important to get it right. At the same time, we were also designing the ship cards and what the look and feel of those was going to be. So that will be the subject for series number 2. I just want to do a quick shout out to everyone who worked on this project at Titan Forge and at CCP. This was definitely a great partnership between the two. All the people you see here, folks at Titan Forge that worked on the game and helped develop it. Like I said earlier, I've been working on this for almost 2 years, so I may get some of the details wrong. So I'm just going to try to do the best I can with my memory and walk you through it. So as I said earlier too, that this was the earliest part. So when I first got contacted, it was, hey, we have a video game, EVE Online, and which we like to translate into a board game. Already the central ideas that would go all the way through were established, that it was going to be a hexagonal board using miniatures of the spaceships. That's important to know because that is kind of Titan Forge's expertise, is in building and selling the miniatures. And so that was definitely something that was there from the very beginning, even before I came on board. One of the first things you do when you're conceptualizing, people use many different names for it, mood boards or ideation or other conceptual aids. But one of the things that we did right off the bat was pull elements from EVE, of course, but also other science fiction based board games, card games, and other elements. And some of the things that you're looking at here are some of the ones that were sent to me by Titan Forge at the very, very beginning, just to sort of get ideas going and look and feel, where we wanted to be as far as design processes and things go. It's also important, I think, to mention that, one of the things that we wanted to do from the very beginning was to use the development of the creative for the ship cards and for this core box, help inspire the game developers as well. So I think that's mutual development going on at the same time is a really interesting way to go about it. It's not that the game was done and we needed a box design, and it wasn't that the box design was done and we needed a game to go under it. These things were being developed in conjunction and at the same time. So very, very early days. And I can show you a little bit of that with this next design. This was very early on. This was sent to me by Jed at Titan Forge at the very beginning. And conceptually speaking, this was one of the first ideas that we had, was a fleet of ships coming out of a Stargate, and then using that as a graphic, which is quite compelling. As EVE players, we all know, a fleet coming out of a Stargate, that's the instigation for a lot of exciting adventures. And I think that this was not an inappropriate place to get started. You have to start somewhere, right? Back then at the beginning, we didn't even have a name for this yet. It was basically just EVE Online board game. So that was part of the process as well. So this is one of the first designs that I did, taking that idea and using the Old Man Devereaux Stargate in Old Man Star. You can see here, this is extremely rough, and I threw this together from existing elements that I had. And I even did a quick sketch, you can tell, of the foreground with an astronaut kind of guy looking off at the gate. This probably may have even happened before the rough that you saw in the previous screen. And back then we were throwing out I was throwing out names. I was coming up with just lists of possible names for the game. Gatefire just happened to be one that I used on this design, but there were many, many others, which has kind of all been lost to the mist of time. But you can see in these next batches start to take that idea to another level. And again, these elements these are very, very rough, very quick. I mean, I'm spending, maybe a couple of hours on these, trying to do as many as possible, getting them done, relatively fast. These are existing elements that I already have access to, or, just quick screenshots from the game, composited in Photoshop. I'm not really spending a lot of time on, jet engines, on engine trails or flashes or lighting or anything like that. I'm just basically using elements to see, what works and what doesn't work. You can see on the white background one, it's very similar to the concept that we had earlier. One of the things that you'll notice as we go along is that graphics and line elements and icons will start to appear in different places, and that's because of the ship cards were also being designed at the same time. So I was starting to create a little bit of look and feel from a graphics standpoint as well, which they'll start making their way into the cover designs. And this is again another one which, it was one of the, and I've said this many times before in my talks and in other videos and podcasts, but one of the challenges with Eve has always been scale, a sense of scale, because the previous screen, how big are these ships and how impressive should I be? How impressed should I be and introducing an element of a space station or something with people on it was one idea that we went through. It didn't really go anywhere with that, as you can see. I mean, there's just so many problems inherent with that, but this was a quick comp and just quick sketches of the astronauts that I just threw out, in a couple of hours to try to get a sense of whether this was going to work or not. Here's a great example of what I talked about earlier, where graphics are starting to appear and be used. This is the first appearance on these cover designs of the fitting circle. Became an element that I used consistently in the ship card designs. So I'm guessing from its appearance here that this cover design probably coincided with kind of nailing that down on the ship card side, that was going to be a recurring element. And you'll see as we go through even more cover designs that it starts to become a main element. Yeah, we're still stuck on Galenti. If you noticed, the Galenti ships coming out of the Stargate, probably most likely because that's all I had at the time or whatever. But you can see the slasher makes an introduction here. But this is, again, another issue with this particular idea is how do you get all the faction ships represented equally? So that's a concern, and has been a concern, or was a concern at the time. And so that's where we'll get to where we see next when we start to introduce more faction ships. And you can see one of these designs even, I was probably still, we didn't have a name for this yet, so I was still just using Gatefire in the design. And this is a Stargate straight on. It's a funny story I know with the nebula in the middle. In this particular design, this goes to show you that I have an extensive library from having been involved in Eve for such a long time, almost a little over 16 years now. One of the things that you'll see pop up in various places and is previous stuff. So I definitely I try not to throw anything away and reuse it when I can. This particular Stargate and the nebula in the middle is from a contest that CCP held way back, I think in 2018, 2019 for Eve Vegas. And it was a poster design contest for Eve Vegas, I believe. Anyway, that was a Stargate that I illustrated and the nebula I illustrated. The poster was completely different than this cover design, obviously. It had I think if I remember correctly, an Inyo trying to jump. And basically the tagline was jump in, Eve. So again, there's a hexagon elements too are starting to become a design element because of the board game being on a hexagonal board. He's trying to start working in hexes into design, and you can see that transforming into the next round of concepts that we'll be going through. You can see the background there is a hex background. Now we're seeing ships flying at us instead of coming out of a Stargate. Kind of abandoned that idea. Yeah, so that's a Kronos at the top, and a Panther and a Paladin, and a whole bunch of ships from the different factions with the Keepstar and icons for each of the factions. And you can also see now that when I was doing these, I was also doing them in 3D so that we could get a sense for what the box looked like, or what the box might look like in physical space, because that has a lot to do with how it looks and how it feels, and the determination to be for creation. And then I will say that as we get a little bit further on, some of these are taking longer than others. Sometimes it's very much about let's see the concept, and then sometimes it's more about let's start refining a little bit and see if these things hold up. But we still hadn't quite decided yet, so here was a quick one that I did. Again, with that idea of the human figures in the design, to try to give some scale, but also, we started really thinking that, player representation might be very important as well. And you'll see that even though this was kind of a throwaway one, that's Rixx and my alt Anastasia, which I pulled from the game, just thrown in there as an example. But you'll see that this idea, though, a lot of these ideas that we're seeing, the concepts of them, will translate even into the final design to kind of get pulled along. This is another one, a variation on the thing. We kind of really did like this, and I do. The idea of it anyway. I don't know that this wouldn't be the final or anything like that, but as a concept, I kind of liked it. It's got a lot of hexagons. It's got the ship grid, ship fitting tool, the hex, the different icons it was starting to be a design direction that we kind of liked. But, the thing about Kronos from the beginning, from the front, is they're kind of weird looking. So started trying to figure out maybe there might be better options for that. In this particular case, I used a golem, which definitely, looks a little bit better from the front. I love Kronos's. I just used one yesterday. But again, that's, design direction. And then I did one real quick with a Titan with an avatar. That was kind of interesting, but you could even tell a lot of quick drawing there on the avatar shooting the Doomsday. It kind of got stuck, honestly. This was where this idea started to run out of gas, because it kind of got a little bit tiresome. And it wasn't really working. Like I said, I liked it. I liked a lot of the elements, but maybe too many elements, maybe too much emphasis on the elements themselves and not the composition itself. So I think if I remember correctly, this is when I was like, okay, got to take a fresh start here, or maybe go off in a weird direction and see if that doesn't clarify some things. And you'll see in these next batch of covers that we start going, or at least I started going in some weird, different directions. Maybe not weird, but I'll show you that one, because that is very purple, which I like. It's a very sort of traditional, game box. You'll see too the elements of the ship design lines, outlines in the background. Those are all from the ship cards. So again, I can say that this is probably right around the time when the ship card design was getting really narrowed down, because I had all these done. I had to draw each one of those little above views and outline for each of the ship cards. Each of the ship cards has a little above view. So I think this is quite striking, and I like it from a graphics design standpoint, but tone down the purple a little bit more so that the icons pop. It has a lot going for it. I kind of like it, but I don't like it necessarily from a game box design. I just kind of like it. And that's, you have to kind of separate those things too, where, personally, I like a lot of design and it's very clean, but is it right for the project? Not necessarily. So I tried to take the color out of it and see if that worked. Those of you who know my work on Rixxjavix.com, you've probably seen the Azariel poster. This is where that background came from, with all the ships in gray and the fitting window and that. So I kind of reused that idea for a poster later on. Take that idea and maybe throw some spaceships in it and see if that worked, which it really didn't. And then again, another weird idea here, maybe going in a completely graphical direction and maybe using some avatars, some avatar art. That Bruder portrait is actually another one of those reuses from an old piece that I had done years ago. And then this is kind of the combination of those two things, purple, blue graphics with the fitting wheel from the previous version, and then even further back from the planet, and trying to combine those two things into something that made some kind of sense. Again, didn't really work, although the one on the right there, I do dig it a little bit, but only from a personal standpoint. It's kind of, there might be something there if I kept working on it. And then we went in a completely different direction with bands, the idea of bands and representing each of the factions with maybe some faction spaceships, and not really working. And then this is probably the wildest one, which I kind of dig it. The idea of stargates came back, but with the fitting windows representing different stargates and the vagabond coming out of them. Again, not really appropriate for this project probably, but it's a very striking design, and I think there's something to it, and maybe it'll survive in a future piece. And then I went a little crazy with I'll just put everything, including the kitchen sink, on the cover, and let's see how that works. So this was where the one on the right came from, which is just characters and spaceships and planets and suns and stars. And if you're eagle-eyed and you're familiar with some of the illustrations that I've done over on rixxjavix.com, you might recognize that sun illustration is an element that I created a while back for another project that never went anywhere. So I just kept that file. It's just a digital illustration that I did of a star, and I recently reused that element in Ikatursa poster that I recently just put up for sale on rixxjavix.com. So again, I never throw anything away. I keep stuff and try to use it when I can. So then then I decided, well, maybe, metals. Started thinking about textures, metals, angles, looking at things a little from a different angle, or, maybe the box is more graphic, and less spacey. And then that really kind of didn't go anywhere either. I even did some beat up metal, like from a keep star or the side of a armor plated ship. And again, they're cool, but it's not really something that would last, I think. And then this is kind of the moment where all of these things kind of came together and sparked something new. So I started thinking, what is it about all of these that we do like, and stripping away all the extraneous elements and trying to create something that had that evoked an emotion, included a human being or a player, really had nothing else, and what would that look like? And this is where this design came from. And this, again, probably submitted along with a bunch of the others that you just saw kind of at the same time. But this one's the one that, out of all that we've been through, kind of struck a chord. At the time, the background I was using was the Eve Gate, for obvious reasons, because that's kind of the birthplace of EVE Online and New Eden. And the idea was a player looking out at a fleet, which, really isn't represented here very well yet, which we'll get to in a little bit. But this was kind of this is the moment we were waiting for, when something kind of starts making sense to everybody. That's when I started refining that one. So all of a sudden it's like, maybe start adding some more ship, maybe work on the structure that he's standing in. Maybe we'll add a control desk and maybe some HUD, heads up displays. Maybe throw some graphics in there, see what that looks like. Maybe get rid of the structure completely, like he's just standing in front of a giant window. And again, I know that for the most part, EVE players are inside capsules and pods, but that doesn't make, a pod-shaped thing right there wouldn't work very well. But that's that one without any graphics on it. So that's where it really started to feel like we were onto something. But Eve Gate, as beautiful as it is, it's not a recognizable structure to anybody who doesn't play Eve. And even for us, it doesn't stand out. It's not distinctive. It's an awesome place to be and a great place to visit if you've never been there. Highly recommend it. It's not, graphical enough. I've always been a big fan of this place, and I love the look of it. It's got beautiful color, and it's very dramatic. It just really spoke to me. So when I replaced it with that, that's when I started to really feel like we were on the verge of something really great here. This is the moment where I took some extra time, illustrated a few ships, like actually, sat down and created some ships to throw in there. The Golem and the Kronos especially. The other three are, I think the Zealot there is also an illustration, but I think the Crow and the Vagabond were still just elements pulled from the game at that point. I don't think I'd actually spend any time with them. And again, the structure, the shape of that structure that he's standing in, that's just quick, kind of throwing it together, trying to figure out what a structure like that would look like and what would play well. And you can see that, as we go along here, it starts to evolve and get refined. The same is true with the background. Where are the planets going? I had, between the one you just saw before and this one, I had spent a lot more time on the planet, spent more time on the nebula itself, refining that and getting that illustration to work properly. And also, I think at this point, I had started to throw some extra ships in there. There's a Malediction, and I think the Crow at this point might be an actual illustration. And then some of the structure starts to get refined a little bit more. You'll notice how the floor starts to change. You'll see it even more in this one. So as we go along here, you can tell, things are starting to get a little bit more refined. So I don't know what else to say about this, but that the idea of the crossbars and the window, trying to define the fact that we're not standing out in space, that this is actually an indoor scene that we're looking out at, and then how do you do that? And I did, probably 4 different variations on internal control rooms. I wish I had a final version of this outline that you're seeing, but that I want to show you how the drawing process starts with these. This is created in Illustrator, and it is basically the constructed line drawing for the structure that I would be painting in afterwards. And here is a example of 2 of those, and this is exactly the same illustration, but just color treated differently for each of these. So just to get a sense of, hey, what's playing against the oranges and the background, what kind of color temperature are we looking at? And another version of that, less stuff and more about lighting. And then here is a big view. And one of the things I wanted to bring out too is that illustration or design ended up being a need for a much bigger version of that, because the box wrap, right? So you got the sides of the box, top of the box, and the bottom of the box to deal with. So you can't just draw a square or illustrate a square. You have to think about all the stuff that goes on the sides of the box and everything. So this is yet another Illustrator line drawings of the inside of the spacecraft, which I would use as a guideline for when I started painting it. And this is where it kind of started to coalesce into something. The elements are starting to work, starting to feel. And again, this is very basic color treatment for that. This is just probably 3rd or 4th step on rendering it. And then this is what it would look like final rendering for that particular piece. Actually, this is actually the final piece that I did. I'm super happy with it. As a matter of fact, it's in my portfolio. This is a really awesome piece of work from me, and something that I had never really done before, completely. I, certainly illustrated spaceships, and I've illustrated elements and people, but putting it all together into a final piece like this was really cool and a lot of fun. So I'm super happy with it. And that is the piece that basically was approved for the final box. Basically took mine and did this to it, and It's absolutely perfect. I'm super happy with the cover and the process that got us here, the teamwork that happened, the feedback from Roman and Jed and all the people at Titan Forge, and the process. So how long of a time period are we talking about? Probably 2 months, 2.5, 3 months so before we got to the previous screen, and then another month or so before this really became coalesced into the final. So that's it. Thanks for coming along on my core package illustration TED Talk. If you have any questions specifically or want to know anything more, leave a comment down below. Be sure to like and subscribe, because I'm going to be doing this again in another few weeks as regards to the ship cards. And then after that, I'll probably do another one for all the other ancillary elements, the expansion boxes, things. I'll probably just throw those into one of these and do them all together. But maybe if they take up a little bit more time, I might do them separately. So thanks for joining.